everybody, my name is Brooklyn, otherwise known as the Dramatic Otaku. The dramatic otaku. Please appreciate this. This is the worst joke I've ever made. Merch? Welcome to the January-February Weeb wrap-up, where I'm fixing the Weeb wrap-up by doing January and February. Hello everybody, welcome to the January-February Weeb wrap-up. If you do not know what this series is, it is me, a bi-monthly little series where I share to you all of the anime and manga that I have read in the last 2 months, usually being in 2 parts, the first part being filmed at the end of the first month so that I have collective thoughts of what I have read and watched, and the second part being what I have read and watched in the second month. I have a long list of videos in this series, and this is the first one of 2023, so I hope you guys enjoy this video because we have a lot to go through. I don't know why, but somehow January just seems to be a lot of anime and manga for me, and especially for me this year, as I may or may not have picked up a lot of manga. So I got a lot of manga for my birthday. So we have a lot of manga to talk about. So yeah, I also surprisingly watched a lot of anime in January, and not so much in terms of how many series I watched, but the volume of episodes I watched. I guess also in the amount of series I watched, but this is just in January, babe, so yeah. Also the shirt, this was a joke. Me and my friend went thrifting, we found the shirt that said dramatic on it. I had to add the other two. It's a little too perfect, so you will be seeing this in other videos. Also glasses, these are my reading glasses. I have a huge fucking thing right here of everything I have to say about these fucks. Also, technically some of this is late December, as I was trying to get the December Otaku review, one of those two names, whatever the fuck I called it, out as quickly as possible, and I actually read some of the manga after I actually uploaded that video. Not after, before I uploaded that video. Now that I've waffled on for a bit, let's get into the actual review. As always, there is a spoiler warning at the start of this video. Now, I have decided to put content warnings before each book that I talk about, or any series, except for Junji Ito, but it's Junji Ito, so there should be evident content warnings because he is like the king of gore. Anyway, spoiler warnings for all the series that I talk about, be this in manga or in anime form. January manga. Now, as I mentioned, this is partially the manga that I read in December, starting off with these two lovelies. So, first of all, Yakuza Lover, got this at Christmas. There's more plot than plot in this book, so honestly it wasn't that much interesting. It's less spicy than the last 2 volumes, I can say that. That's all I have to say about this. We have another volume of that to talk about in a little bit. But my favourite series, I Think Our Son Is Gay. So I have a couple notes. Now, I know I mentioned in the last one that I thought Yuri was some form of queer or trans in the last review of this last volume. This volume, however, has made me realise that I completely analysed that character wrong and made a wrong assumption in probably the most clarifying way possible that this book could have made it, that making assumptions of certain characters and stuff like that is wrong, obviously, but it also made me adjust my thinking around Yuri's character. So this volume goes through a few plot points that are important to telling the story, and through these stories you'll sort of see how I misunderstood Yuri's character kind of, and how I'm as bad as the father character a little bit in terms of assuming sexual orientation and gender of Yuri. So the first plot point is Hiroki and Daigo going into the choir club. The second plot point is Yuri getting a haircut. The third is Hiroki protecting Yuri from bullies. Number 4 is Mr. Tono's boyfriend, which is a little bit of a diverging plot point, but is still very valid to the story. And 5 is Hiroki's father is back for longer in this volume than he was in the last volume. Excluding Mr. Tono's point for a second, we look into the dynamics of how the kids are living their lives, with Hiroki joining the choir to be with Daigo as they're in separate classes, and Yuri having a haircut. These by themselves are harmless and essentially mean nothing until the father is brought back into the plot. And what he does when he's brought back is he essentially harasses his kids, thinking that Yuri is gay because he only hangs out with girls, and Hiroki is gay because he only hangs out with boys. It's a little bit of a double standard there. The story basically goes that making assumptions on someone because of your predetermined perception on what is feminine and what is masculine and what is gay and what is straight are baseless and stupid, and I love that message specifically for this book. Is honestly something that, while in this book it's suggesting it to fictional characters, the application into real life and like these books actually like showing you how to like apply this thinking into real life, I actually admire a lot in this book. And it's this plot point that really made me rethink how I perceived Yuri's character in the last novel. I would admittedly like him to be also queer. Yes, that is my own little thing. It's a book about a gay son. I would like both sons to be gay because it's my happy little gay book. But that's not necessarily what Yuri's character is, and I don't think that's the way he's trying to be written. He's just Yuri. So that's something I absolutely adore about this series. Honestly, if you gave this to like a fujoshi who's straight, they might not be as fond of this series. But honestly, if this can like change the mind of someone like that who's like a fujoshi because it's like, oh my god, everyone has to be gay and
everybody has to be gay, they all have to fuck, and only like men can fuck and there can't be any male best friends, that sort of stuff.
I think this book would be very good to show them, especially because our next plot point, Mr. Tono, particularly Mr. Tono's boyfriend. Honestly, the Mr. Tono's boyfriend plot point is a really good story in demystifying gay relationships and mentioning queer words in regular conversation, such as clocking, to make this sort of slang more normalized. There isn't like this huge tizzy and fuss about Mr. Tono wanting to say secret and going, oh no, I'm not gay. He literally comes out and just goes, yeah, I'm gay. And then they move on. Then in a later chapter, another fujoshi co-worker mentions it, and the message is just reiterated with them being disappointed with the lack of spectacle. That character comes to the conclusion that gay people are just like everyone else, and thus leaving her Fujo fantasies for her books. I honestly really love this story. I think this is like amazing, not only like in the message that it's sending, but it could also be like a good like educational, it's still fiction, but it's a better look into queer representation and how allies should act around like queer people, demystifying the spectacle that is gay relationships and all that sort of stuff. I adore this so fucking much. And I did get like caught up into myself into thinking that, you know, Yuri was queer as well. And this really brought me back down to earth as well. Like, just because it's fiction, I'm like jumping on assumptions. This is like, I don't know, I feel like I can like apply a lot of these to real life situations, and it just makes you really fucking happy. I can't help it. I absolutely adore these book series, especially Volume 3. Volume 3 is amazing. Honestly, if you are queer, I would highly suggest these, and if you want to like put these in front of your friends and go, this is how you should be acting, that sort of stuff. I guess this is a good tool to help. It's still fiction, but it is actually a decent look into how to demystify the whole gay thing that everyone's the same pretty much. I like the themes of this book. It's really cute. It is like one of my favorite books. It is definitely my favorite queer book, especially in the terms of like demystification of like gay people. And it does like it doesn't like say, oh, fujoshis are bad. It literally calls out fujoshis and say that, hey, your big reactions, romance stuff between men stays in the books. Don't bring that out into real life. Don't ship people in real life. Keep that in your little book corner over there. So that's something that I like as well. It's not attacking anybody. It's actually quite like mature with its themes as well, and I adore it. And yes, so that was December, or the last 3 days of December. But we move into January. Now, 23rd of December, I went out with my friends and I got Blood on the Tracks. This is a horror series that I got a recommendation from YouTube as I was looking for more horror stuff on my little horror list. And I can safely say that I've crossed off Blood on the Tracks for as much as there is currently, because Blood on the Tracks surprisingly is still ongoing. Also, look at how nice and like thick this volume is. I really love it. I have like a notes section that's like per chapters. I read part of this online as I only have volume 4, so I read the first 3 volumes online, read volume 4 in book form, and then read the rest of it online. As I said, it is still ongoing. So this is the course of me reading it. It is a psychological horror. I would say there is a strong content warning for this series. So I didn't add a content warning, but there is mentions of abuse. There is psychological manipulation of a child. Obviously, there's a child character and a mother character. It is solely centered around these two most of the time, so it can get pretty uncomfortable seeing as it's psychological horror. There is, like with most horror themes of death, I don't think there's gore. From my memory, there's not gore. Also, Blood on the Tracks is the English name. There was a translated name that made so much more sense with the online translations, and I can't remember what the actual translation's name was, but Blood on the Tracks doesn't make as much sense as those like translated names do, which is something that I want to point out off the bat. But yes, there is also themes of murder, psychosis, abuse, as I've said before, weirdly sexual elements. Like, there's uncomfortable moments between the mother and her son, first of all, but there's also like this kid is 13 and he hasn't been told about sex ed and his body is going through changes. That's all I'm gonna say in terms of sexual themes, because they're not sexual, but they're really fucking weird. Okay, so let's go into my notes for Blood on the Tracks. This was as of me reading it. So, holy shit, this story is fucked. But like, in a compelling, good psychological horror kind of way. Seiichi Osabe is a 13-year-old boy just living his life, very normal, has a crush on a girl, has some friends, but the odd thing about him is he's weirdly loyal to his mother, this bitch right here. A regular old mama's boy, who does whatever his mother says. His mother is a little strange, helicoptering around her son, only wanting his attention and caring for him. In the first couple of chapters, Seiichi and his cousin Shigeru hang out all the time with their mothers talking during these encounters, planning a little hike getaway for the two families. Shigeru makes it clear to Seiichi that he finds Seiichi's mother incredibly strange, and this ends up coming back to get him when on said hiking trip that their mothers planned, and joke tripping Seiichi, Shigeru gets launched off a fucking cliff by Seiichi's mother. This starts the fucked up events of Blood on the Tracks. Okay, so first of all, the mother felt super fucking weird before that instance. Obviously, it's meant to be this weird dynamic, it's horror, it's meant to feel off-putting. Also, I was getting very much emotional incest from, this kind of actual incest vibes as well, though none of that is really there. And right after our mother character launches Shigeru off of the cliff, we get to see some fucked upness going on in the mother character. So what this story is Seiichi, our mama's boy, and his extremely traumatized, emotionally incestual mother, who is willing to murder as long as her perceived world is kept intact. Now, this was when I was like halfway through the second volume. Sometimes this changes later in the series. Seiichi becomes so traumatized by this event and by his mother outright saying that he can't date the girl that he likes in a only slightly less traumatizing rant that he develops a nasty stutter and becomes essentially non-verbal from stress. The stutter is sort of the main evident part, but there are some points where he just can't say words, and this is mostly a stutter, but it also appears as non-verbal in some panels and some. That's how I interpret it anyway. He becomes just frozen from stress and can't say what he wants to say. Some kind of really deep, dark postpartum depression is going on here, as the mother has nothing and nothing to live for but Seiichi, and has gone off the deep ends. Chapter 24 is so fucked. Why would you ask your child if it's okay if you die? Which I'm pretty sure is in this fucking chapter. No, it's the chapter before this volume. And I will say, it does have a pretty traumatizing start to volume 25, to chapter 25, where Seiichi's mother is strangling him. Anyway, the whole part with Fukichi feels inappropriate, but given the character's backstory, it makes some sense. She desperately wants someone to love and take care of her, so the character of Fukichi is where the whole Seiichi is feeling changes in his body. Thus, it feels incredibly inappropriate for this story, but again, given the character's backstory, she desperately wants someone to love and take care of her because of her home life, and she feels synergy with Seiichi on that front. However, both of them being 13 and Seiichi still not being able to come to terms with his mother being in the wrong, unlike Fukichi, who has came to that conclusion long ago, essentially on her first meeting with Seiichi's mother, it also makes sense why Seiichi went back to his mother. But the whole point of Fukichi getting closer with Seiichi was extremely uncomfortable to read. Like, I wouldn't say it's Shinsekai Yori uncomfortable, but it's still nearly on par with Shinsekai Yori uncomfortable. And what makes it even more uncomfortable is the character of Fukichi just kind of feels like a mini version of Seiichi's mother. Spoilers, but chapter 70, she was arrested. And then chapter 82, the dead mother image was unexpected and gruesome, and I love it. This was then followed by a fucking plot twist. So the obvious plot twist is that Seiichi has been highly abused by his mother for his entire life. I'm not going to spoil the reason as to why, but he has, and because of the love bombing she's been doing, it made him dependent on her, as well as severely fucked him up. This psychological horror is really interesting, and it has elements of our protagonist being an unreliable narrator, because you think you have the whole story, and then when it's actually all revealed, it just feels so impactful and interesting. It's actually something that doesn't feel like it came out of nowhere, like in other horror freaking manga that I know. Little things that were like visibly shown throughout the series, but not necessarily drawn upon. And it just added a layer of depth that avoided that tell not show aspect of certain manga, such as Until Your Bones Rot. And as someone who personally has a mother who listens to a lot of true crime, so I'm usually just sat there also watching true crime with her, this feels eerily similar to a lot of mother-son abuse cases. I wouldn't say she's necessarily a narcissistic parent, but she's certainly something very similar. And then there was another fucking plot twist. The role reversal is so fucking weird and definitely unexpected, because I did that whole like mini analysis of the psychology of Seiichi, the psychology of this young child who I thought had been so clearly emotionally abused, and then there's just a weird role reversal where it was Seiichi sending beams into his mother's brain to make his mother do the stuff that she does, like fucking punching her off of the cliff. The role reversal, again, so fucking weird and completely unexpected. I low-key like it and also low-key fucking hate it. The part of me that wants a simple story is really annoyed, but like, I noted mentally that Seiichi's mother is constantly changing faces, and sometimes so is Seiichi, and the switch up actually made some sense as to why that happens with this other plot twist, and I genuinely actually kind of like it, but the fucking flip-flop fuckery of it all is genuinely messing with me, which is pretty good for a psychological horror, I'm not gonna lie. It's supposed to mess you up, it's supposed to make you think and question what the fuck you're reading, but keep you engaged. That's the most important part. It's supposed to keep you engaged. And I am now up to the point where there's recent updates, and what do you fucking mean it's not finished? I got into this series thinking it was finished. It is not. And I'm really unhappy that it's not. It's genuinely, if you are a horror fanatic, this is something to pick up and read. It is like so uncomfortable, and like it like sends you through a loop. It's like psychologically like ooh, and it starts off like it's gonna be a simple horror novel, but it's not, and it's really, I really adore it. Personally, instead of Blood on the Tracks, I would like to call it Gaslight, Gatekeep, and Manipulate Your Child, but with the last little section that I've read that I've purposely kept out of the video because it's still updating, so things could constantly change. That tagline doesn't quite fit as well as Blood on the Tracks. That is not to say that Blood on the Tracks necessarily fits. But yes, that was the first horror manga of the year. Yes, Blood on the Tracks, I can't recommend this highly enough if you are a horror buff, or especially a psychological horror buff. This is genuinely really good. I really, really love it for its like, ooh, kind of effect. I'm very tired, so this review is going to have some sounds. I'm gonna sound a bit like Hinata from Haikyuu, just making sounds and be like, this is how you should feel. Next is the next Yakuza Lover volume. So, number one, I didn't realize there was a 10-year age gap between Oya and Yuri. I also hate that her name is Yuri, but if you didn't think the relationship was predatory before, it certainly feels more like it now. I shouldn't have read this after Blood on the Tracks, personally, because with the dynamic, it's making me like this less, and this is supposed to be my guilty pleasure book. I read this because it's horny, and now you just feel weird. Now, yes, it does feel predatory, but this is a Yakuza smut book for straight women, so I could care less. To be quite honest, I really won't take this series more seriously than it being a smut book, especially when I thought originally it was going to be a gay smut book. Anyway, the second point, and I swear to God, this is so fucking weird, but the weirdest but simultaneously nicest euphemism for sex that I have ever read comes from this fucking volume, and it also comes from the worst fucking character. A character that straight up tries to kidnap and attack the main character so that she can manipulate this character into getting with her. They belong for each other, clearly. The euphemism is dancing like a butterfly on top of him, referring to bouncing on a guy's dick. Now, I don't know why, but that phrase like really struck a chord with me, and I don't like that it did. It's just like weirdly like fruity and floral and feminine, and I like it weirdly enough. Would I fucking use it as a euphemism for sex? Absolutely not. Not in any context. That wasn't me writing a fictional book, but I don't write smut books. I've never written a smut book. Maybe this is my sign to try reading smut on a reading Bitch, that is my day-to-day life. Writing smut on AO3. I don't know why, but it's just an oddly romantic term for something that's like such a carnal act of love, you know? It's like some just weird high femme shit, and I'm kind of living for it. Anyway, that's the biggest point that I got out of Yakuza Lover. The age gap is fucking weird, and butterfly bouncing on that dick. Okay, next, more gay books. First technical gay book of the year was Me Love Song, Volume 4. Now I was, you probably saw this in the last, in the first video of the year actually, when I did my clean out, but when I was putting it in this little section here. First of all, chapter 16, which is the first chapter of this novel, is so fucking fluffy and cute. I am in love with it. I love women, and I love this book. See, that sounded like it hurt, but it did. Volume 4 sort of veers away from the romance element after that first chapter and is more so about our band for this series, the SS Girls. The former singer of the SS Girls is back and coming for their spot in the cultural festival performance, with a smidgen of a date between Yori and Himari in the volume after volume 16. The volume mostly revolves around the B plot turned A plot of the SS Girls and their rivals as they get ready for auditions for the cultural festival, and Himari gets ready with her own club. Honestly, I really like where this is going. This is actually going in a really interesting direction and is more than just, you know, relationship drama. It's like actual drama. It's like turning into just a music manga, and I'm actually really enjoying it. I want this to be animated so fucking badly. It has a good romance to drama ratio, nothing super cliche and nothing too over the top, because I'm starting to get sick of over the top romance, and I honestly love it so much. And there is also another cool cute girl coupling, and the cool girl coupling is like in the rival band, and the cute girl is like Himari's club member. And I want them to date so fucking badly. I will be continuing this series religiously because I love it. It's my cute gay, this is my cute gay romance book. I've got my smut book, I've got my good gay just representation book. This is my cute gay romance, okay? It's my lesbian romance and I love it. And it's only women. If they, I swear to God, again, if they bring a male love interest into this at any point, I will cry, okay? And I will ditch the series in a heartbeat. Okay, so I'm gonna talk about Chainsaw Man again, but this is a disclaimer. Pretty much up until part 2 finishes, I will not be talking about Chainsaw Man unless there is a like detrimental plot point, like within chapter 117. Now I have also read 118, so this plot point doesn't really go anywhere. The ending of chapter 17, first of all, they took away Denji's penguin. Denji got a penguin and they took it away from him. Give my boy back his penguin. He needs the penguin. But also, Yoru taking charge when Asa finally develops feelings for Denji and tries to turn him into a sword. When I tell you, I was on the edge of my seat. Now again, this doesn't go anywhere in 118, but I wanted to talk about it because I was so fucking hyped by it happening in the series. So again, I will not be talking about it until probably the end of part 2 and doing a mini review of part 2. But that being said, let's move on to this clusterfuck. Now, Idle Dreams. I have done a review per volume, mainly because I read these kind of in one go, but also because I basically did a combined review of the last 2, and it's been a long time since I actually read the last 2, and I got all these for Christmas, and I kind of needed to read them all in one sitting, otherwise I could not stand still, and that's not me like making that shit up. I literally bought Boys Run the Riot and like on a whim because I really fucking wanted it, and I couldn't read it until I finished this fucking series. So, and I do kind of mean finish because there is currently only 7 volumes, but it's not finished. We'll get to that. So where we left off in volume 3 was Chicago was fucking dating a 15-year-old and she is 31. I was so upset, so unbelievably upset that they took the series where we didn't want it to go. Now I will say, overall with this, they fixed it. They fixed it. Spoilers, she breaks up with the 15-year-old, as she should. Some more drama goes around and it switches from the drama with the 15-year-olds to her actual adult life. And I like that. You set the record back on track. But like, did you have to include the 15-year-old shit? Because I initially picked up the series and like said, hey mom, I want these books because like, this is like the drama. It's uncomfortable, it's weird, it's the drama. This is my actual guilty pleasure series. But I was pleasantly surprised about how they finished the little I'm dating a 15-year-old arc for Chikage. So I start off my review with jail. Actual jail for this woman. I really don't like her being in a relationship with Rue. I hate the notation of don't hurt your fans. I don't know if it's because I've been a K-pop stan and know how toxic idol culture is in both Korea and Japan, but I hate it because it pops up again in this fucking book. But I hate it. The idols should be worried about themselves and their safety, not the personal relationships of offending their fans. It's hard to describe. I think if you want a more eloquently spoken reason as to why I don't like the notion of don't hurt your fans, then you should watch my review of Heroines Run the Show in my June-July Weeb wrap-up, because that does the kind of complete opposite that Idol Dreams does, and it falls into don't hurt your fans and fucking forgives the fan and rewards the fan for harassing the idol group. So that doesn't do it for here. They diverted this pretty much with the character of Rue, which is the 15-year-old that asked it out Chikage. I love the fact that Rue was pretty much of the thinking of the don't hurt your fans thing is in the wrong. That they're human, they should also be allowed to do the things that they want to do. And then in this volume, Chikage actually fucking tells Rue that she's 31, which Rue clearly doesn't believe, obviously. But like, why the fuck would you tell the 15-year-old you're with this when you're 31? How fucking stupid are you? And then she proceeds to say, I think there's something between Rue and I that's just not clicking. You're 30-fucking-1. That's what's not clicking. You are double his fucking age. That is the reason why you are not clicking. Stupid fucking woman. Oh my god. I'm glad she's not dating a fucking 15-year-old at the end of this book, because dude, I do not think I would have been able to read the rest of this goddamn series. Fuck me. I hate the plot point with Chikage and Rue dating. I hate it so much. Also, the character of Piccolino is trans. I will not say otherwise because she literally said, body of a man, heart of a woman. I am taking it and fucking running, okay? I know I just had that whole bit of don't assume a character or don't assume a person is this and this. Piccolino is trans. That is my headcanon. But volume 5, a drastic improvement because Chikage is no longer dating a 15-year-old. Okay, so in volume 5, Chikage standing up for Tokita I love. When the fuck are they going to get back into the original B plot, which was Tokita's feelings for Chikage? You know, Tokita is the one who is the tall blonde guy that she went to school with. Also, I love the first chapter where Chikage as Akari performs for this weird fucking C plot that was going on. Honestly, if Idol Dreams was an anime, I would love for this scene to be animated, but only that scene in particular. I honestly prefer this volume because it's going into Chikage's adult life and adult drama. About fucking time they did, because I'm sick of the 15-year-old shit. This is something that I've wanted to see more and less of dating minors. Honestly, this series is just kind of fun, just to be like, why the fuck would you do that, you stupid woman? and for the drama. And Volume 5 is honestly the best one because it actually feels like a decent story that doesn't involve a person dating someone half their fucking age. I'm also fully waiting for the world to come crashing down around Chikage, and I'm not gonna lie, she should not be rewarded this much. Chikage is very good at being a toxic friend. Being in love with Tokira, but getting him back together with his cheating ex, pretty much before this point, it was clear that Tokira was the only one who had feelings for Chikage as well as Haru. And I thought that the direction of this manga was going was Chikage and Tokira. Fuck it, it still could go that way, it does. But yes, I was actually happy that Tokira got his happiness by being together and proposing to his ex. And the little scene where he proposes with milk tea is really sweet and kind of amazing. But dude, did you have to make Chikage fall in love with him just right after all of this shit? She was dating a 15-year-old literally last volume. Chikage is just such a mess, and this manga series is actually a fucking mess as well. That's why I love it so much. Now Volume 6. Now this is the cheating ex. You would also recognize her as the bitch from Volume 1 who likes to bully Chikage. Cool. So last volume was amazing, super good. This volume, you kill off Hibiki's 5 to 6-year-old sister. We love that. You just killed off a fucking child. It's not like I had an emotional attachment to that character and thought she would be more important to the entire fucking plot, but okay. Hina is pregnant, but not with Takita's child. Oh, that's her name. Her name's Hina. I feel like Hibiki's little sister was killed off for absolutely no fucking reason, and it didn't really add to the story, except now Akari and Hibiki have another thing in common, another trauma and another bond, which we don't want. We do not want to fucking start shit between Hibiki and Akari, aka Chikage. We don't fucking want that, because that's weird, and we just got over the fact that Chikage dated Ru. And this drama occurs as Hina runs away. Yes, these two things intertwine a fuck ton. And going back to the fact that Takeda and Hina are getting married, and that Hina has a secret baby. Drama occurs because Hina runs away at her own wedding, runaway bride, because of the baby, because she feels so incredibly guilty that she's pregnant without Takeda's child. This does, again, have a look into Chikage's life as an adult, so I do like this volume, but not nearly as much as the last volume. Speaking of last volumes, Volume 7. Haru is an underhanded as shit individual. This bitch, underhanded. We hate him. All my sisters hate Haru. Haru is just an underhanded little shit because one of his best friends from high school is heartbroken and in hospital. And he takes Takeda's first love, equally his, but his first love, on a fucking date. This date is also as equally as stressed as Takeda is. I like that the idol stuff has become the true B-plot of the series. I will also admit, the Haru Chikage kiss, very cute. I adore it. But Haru was turned down by Chikage. I like that the series returned to being about the adult Chikage and not the teenage alter ego Akari. I am assuming that with the eye dream taking effect more and more on Chikage's body, there will probably be only 1 or 2 volumes left in this series. I say that as the first volume, or rather the first chapter, was released in 2013. It has literally been 10 years since this series started, and there's only 7 volumes. I worry I won't get another volume of this, but suddenly it makes more sense at a lot of the tonal shifts that happen in the series. I really do love that the manga came back around to the romance of Takeda and Chikage in the end. This manga is a bit of a mess, but if you like yelling at your characters and being like, what are you fucking doing, then I would actually recommend this series. Again, this is more of a guilty pleasure than Yakuza Lover, because it's like, I fucking hate what this bitch is doing, but it's interesting, I will admit. And it also dawned on me that the mangaka is the exact same person who made Sakurahime, which is a manga that I'm currently selling. Oddly made a lot of sense as to why there were certain points that sort of turned me off this series, and once again, it made sense with the tonal and story shifts. If another volume was to come out, I will still read it. Currently my predictions is that she'll confront or transform in front of Hibiki, breaking his heart, and that's how the B-plot will end, and Takeda and Chikage will end up eventually together. Maybe even fucking adopting Hibiki and his brothers, who the fuck knows? I don't, honestly, I don't put it past this goddamn series to go with that fucking plot point. It would weirdly make sense. Would it be fucking weird? Yes, but that is this series. So, finally, moving away from Idle Dreams, I was able to read Boys Run the Riot. So, our protagonist Ryo knows he's transgender and faces every day with anxiety knowing that he won't be seen how he wishes to be seen. The nail that sticks out will be hammered in as he antagonizes. Everything changes, however, when he meets Jin, a third year who had been held back a year due to poor attendance. After a fateful meeting in a fashion pop-up and some inner soul searching, Jin and Ryo become friends and start their own fashion brand, Jin being the first person to know that Ryo is trans, let alone that he's a guy. Along the way they pick up another friend, but this book is only the beginning of their story. Now, I heard about the story online when I had been looking for some more LGBTQIA+ novels to peruse and to read. This one came up. It is also apparently really good for people who like street fashion, which is just another plus for me. But a funny thing about this, and the reason why I have it, seeing as I got so much manga for Christmas, actually something funny to note in terms of Christmas. So pretty much I got money for Christmas, so I bought more manga, and when I went into the city with my friends to go see the new One Piece cafe or One Piece restaurant burger joint that's in Melbourne Central, we had to walk past Minotaur. Basically, we were already walking past Minotaur, so we decided to go in because they wanted to buy some manga. And I had been agonizing and complaining that during Christmas I had wanted to buy The Drifting Classroom with the money that I had gotten for Christmas. However, Dimix didn't fucking have my book, so I was pretty upset. I was also complaining about, what other book was I complaining about? A Junji yearbook. I was trying to find No Longer Human. That was also not there. So that's how I ended up with the 2 Yakuza Lover novels, as well as I Think Outside is Gay, because I bought those with Christmas money when I had really wanted The Drifting Classroom. I had also mentioned Boys Run the Riot as well, because I really wanted this book as well, but I couldn't fucking find it anywhere, at least in store. Online, everywhere. In store, nowhere, you know? So we go into Minotaur, and wouldn't you know, all of the manga that I had complained about was in Minotaur. I'm not fucking joking. There was 2 shelves worth of the fucking Drifting Classroom, something that I had really fucking wanted to buy when I had money for manga. And then I saw this and I was like, I need to buy one of these bitches. I'm either buying the Drifting Classroom, No Longer Human, or this book. And this was the cheapest because I couldn't live with myself if I walked out of that goddamn store without at least one of these 3 books. So I got this. Now, my honest feelings after that little story, my honest feelings is that I kind of actually do have mixed feelings about this book. It's a good start to an ongoing story, and the vibes that I get from this are kind of a mix of Psyche K, mainly because Jin reminds me of Nendo, but slightly smarter, and kind of like Chainsaw Man because Ryo reminds me of Denji. Not one for one reminds me of Denji, but gives me similar kind of vibes. Especially when Ryo and Jin are getting into their brand. I'm not gonna lie, I would have liked some more like bromance between Ryo and Jin, at least to like establish a decent friendship, because just starting a partnership for selling clothes immediately in a story feels kind of unnatural, even despite how welcoming Jin is. I do also like that Ryo is clearly in love with his best friend, but is scared that he will lose her. I can see that coming back in future chapters to be super important. Overall, I liked it. I wasn't immediately enthralled, and that's sort of what threw me off. It might take a few more chapters, and I will say Ryo's art, realizing them as a guy in a girl's body, was so fucking sick. So hold on. This art here, super fucking sick. I adore it, and I can't wait as a person who loves street fashion to see, and I can't wait for a person who loves street fashion and street art to see art like that in clothing designs, especially in a series like this as well. And I can't wait to see this story evolve. I do really like it, and I absolutely would recommend it. It's just that there's a little bit of like growing pains with this series personally, and I don't know if it's because I was in burnout mode or what, because after this I went into fanfiction mode. We'll get to that in a minute, but I now want to talk about my latest read, which was completely online, and that is Rocket Girl, which is a short Yuri comedy series. So this was a short 12 chapter, obviously comedy romance series. It is a Yuri manga, and it's about some girls in a band, not K-On!, and the romance between our protagonist Kaname and Seira. Kaname is a street performer who is an awful singer, but an amazing musician and songwriter. After a frustrating heckle and a spark meeting between her and Seira, Kaname is approached by a giraffe who is a music producer. Her name's Maggie. That's about it to her character. This is the love story and partial heartbreak of Kaname and Seira, the songwriter and the singer muse. I actually found this on Pinterest when I saw this art from chapter 9, and I was immediately invested. First of all, because it got Nana vibes, but it's nothing like Nana. Not that I have started Nana yet, but trust me, it's nothing like Nana. This also introduced me to the Yuri magazine, Comic Yuri Hime, which I shall start be looking more into after this event. I don't think that was English, but I am tired. Now, the actual manga itself. I loved it, and I also didn't love it, which is slightest bit of a contradiction, but I did and did not like it, personally. Now, for some reason, because it was women, I enjoyed it a titchy bit. Some of the moments are really cute, and I haven't read enough Yuri manga, so seeing women be cute and kind of romantic kind of just warmed my little gay heart. As I said, What's Me a Love Song is like my gay romance, my romance. Why is it always bands? Why is it always the gays in bands? I mean, bands are pretty gay anyway. But yes, seeing women in love is really fun. I also did mention this was comedy. I did openly laugh a lot at the small moments, should I say, in this manga, such as the duo Haruko and Katsura, 30-something-year-olds that act as comic relief, who enjoy drinking and loving others. I swear like a fucking bitch. Why can't I just say they fuck? But then is the thing that I hate about the series, and that is the disjointed time sequence of the entire series, which could have worked if it had been longer and not 12 chapters long. Especially when the wispy plot points brought up could have gone somewhere really, really good, but it had nowhere to go within only 12 chapters. The romantic moments also were kind of rushed and sort of, you're done, that sort of thing. Honestly, because of the speed the manga was going, felt a little bit forced, though I won't say that they weren't somewhat enjoyable at the very least. With more development, it could have been really, really something, but romantically, it just wasn't. But if you want a cute comedy series with a bunch of lesbians, and love like music manga, like K-On!, like Whisper Me a Love Song, like Given, and like fan fiction that plays on the motifs of old rock songs, I would actually suggest Rocket Girl, cause it was definitely a fun and enjoyable read, more so as a one-shot comedy series with lesbians than a romance Yuri manga, if that makes sense. So yeah. So, anime. So despite the fact that I've read so much fucking manga, I actually went on a little bit of a fan fiction binge as well, because for a period of time I didn't actually have manga, or I was waiting for Chainsaw Man to update, or I was waiting for Spy Family to update, so I wanted to take a little smidgen, teeny weeny little break from physical manga and online manga and go back into fan fiction, and I decided that I would read some of my favorite fan fiction, which is Haikyuu fan fiction, and I read something so gut-wrenching that I had to continue Haikyuu. So January anime. I decided to finish Haikyuu to the top. So I hadn't actually finished it before this point. I had gotten maybe 2 episodes in, and because Hinata was Hinata and made me cringe when I'd actually gotten up to that point, I was like, no, I'm going to put it down. The last time I read or watched Haikyuu was probably late 2020, early 2021. I definitely didn't watch it in 2022. But I finally finished Haikyuu, and specifically Haikyuu to the top. So what did I think of Haikyuu to the top? Now, every time I've gotten into and watched Haikyuu, or gotten back into, should I say, because this has happened twice now, it's usually me stopping because of Hinata's unbearably cringy shenanigans, which all happen around training camps. So I got back into watching Haikyuu, basically ignoring the first couple of episodes. I kind of just skimmed through them and didn't really watch them, playing them in the background of me doing other things like school. This season was defo jam-packed, and some of the flashbacks in earlier episodes were reanimated to the new art style. If you didn't know, Haikyuu had an art style change when I believe the studio changed, and so the art style now looks slightly more like the actual manga does. However, later in the same season, they do take flashbacks from the very start of the series when it was a completely different art style. I kind of found that a little bit nostalgic and found it really heartwarming. I don't know how other anime fans would have felt about that. Personally, if I'm going to be completely honest, this season was a little bit frustrating during the last couple of episodes. I felt that now let's see if I can pronounce this, Inazakari game went on for just a little too long. I know this was supposed to like mimic the actual stress of a volleyball game, but as a viewer, it was really frustrating, and I know it was kind of like this in the manga as well, despite me not having read the manga yet, but still, at least I can swipe really fast through the manga. I can't exactly do that with an anime with the voice acting and sounds. So I was a little bit frustrated, to say the least, towards the very end. I feel like it could be a couple episodes less, and I was actually really sad that the Nekoma game didn't get animated, and I knew that was gonna happen, but I was still disappointed because it led up to the Nekoma game, and then the Nekoma game never happens, and it's not very likely that Haikyuu is going to get another revival so that we get that Nekoma game unless we get like a movie. But even so, Nekoma is like the pinnacle of the series, so like they've been building up so they could have that one-on-one with Nekoma, and it doesn't happen, and it can't be really portrayed well in a movie. Like, if you watch the other Haikyuu movies, which are like repeats of stuff in the actual series, they take out a lot for the actual game. So something like that for someone or for a team as charismatic as Nekoma, I don't think is a good idea. But who knows what the future could bring. But I think based on the ending, having screenshot clips from the first season in it doesn't seem very likely that Haikyuu is gonna get another renewal. I really like Haikyuu as overall as an entire series, seeing as it probably won't get another renewal. I really love Haikyuu overall. This season was pretty on par with other seasons of the past, with slightly less character development, with the exception of Hinata as always, because Hinata is the main fucking character. I will say that out of all of the seasons, 1 or 2 would probably be the best, but this was a good look down memory lane personally, and mayhaps I will actually get into the manga this time around. That being said, that's enough Haikyuu. I will talk about Haikyuu in another Weeb wrap up probably sometime later in the year. So the next anime that I'm going to talk about is actually a manga that I talked about in the December Weeb wrap up. That being romantic killer. Yes, I caved and actually decided to watch the anime despite the fact I was like, on the manga, you know? So in the first couple of episodes, because I decided not to read more chapters because as it turns out, I was right. Shonen Jump releases Romantic Killer as Vault, like it does with Kaguya-sama when a volume is released. I decided not to read those chapters of Romantic Killer because I found myself really not liking the first couple of episodes just because of the slight detail changes that they made in the story. It was really only cosmetic, but it was so slight that it annoyed me. It annoyed like the actual crap out of me. I decided not to read it and that was a good decision. I watched this series in English. It's on Netflix. I watched it in English because I was helping my partner move out, or at least the first couple of episodes I did. And honestly, I kind of hated it. Like, alongside the I should say it's part English, part Japanese that I watched it in because my Netflix automatically goes onto sub instead of dub, so I kept switching it back to dub if I was doing something, and if I was on break it would be in sub pretty much. This was at least a bit ironically fun in the manga form, but it was all the fun was kind of eliminated during the anime because at least in the webtoon slash manga form, this kind of like cringe kind of romance feels bearable. Because that's like the culture of webtoon, right? It's a little bit cringe, right? I tried the subs for the series and it felt equally as unbearable, if not slightly more bearable in the sub than the dub. I also fucking hate the 3D game element that they made for this series. It's not in the manga whatsoever, but it is in the anime and I fucking hate it. It looks like it was done on MMD. And like this isn't from I hate CGI, I hate 3D animation in anime kind of thing. You'll see my points about CGI in anime when I talk about Junji Ito, but no, this is purely it's really annoying and doesn't need to be there kind of scenario. Okay, pause. That last part of the review was about the first 5 episodes. My tune completely changed during the latter 7 episodes. I'm not going to remove my ass from this hill of I didn't like the series. At the very least, I didn't like the first 7 episodes. The first 7. The last 5 were okay. I genuinely don't remember anything other than the weird wizard inch thing suddenly becoming a gender shifting love interest, and I'm not fucking joking. The wizard becomes a love interest, and this actually becomes an important plot point because of the final episode. The last 2 episodes I watched with my partner, and they loved the show from the last 4 or 5 episodes that they've seen. They've got a little review under this that I asked if they wanted to add, and they did want to add it. So they were very interested in the last 3 episodes, which is valid because the meat of the series, the part that's actually interesting, is in the last 3 episodes, which is extremely, extremely upsetting for a romance series. I will also give this series its props, because the tragic backstory that they give Kazuki, who is the first love interest that we meet, made a lot of sense. It's not like this random thing that they just shoved in. It actually made sense to his character. And I've not seen this level of visual plot development to the lead up to the big reveal of his past in a long time in a lot of anime. As I said, in a lot of anime, it's kind of just shoved in there. This one, it wasn't. It was actually built up quite well, and that I actually am quite fond of for this series. And the best part about it was I didn't feel like I was being spoon-fed the you should pay attention to how this character acts and his mannerisms kind of thing. No, it was really natural for the character to build up to this big reveal. So like, I loved that. I felt like it was such a good feeling to watch, unlike the pain that I've had with some horror series attempting to do the same thing within their series. How the fuck did a comedy romance do this better than a horror mystery? I swear to fucking god. I also got the vibe that if you like Kyo from Fruits Basket, you will like Kazuki. Maybe it's because of the orange hair thing, maybe it's the aloofness, maybe it's the I don't like women thing. I don't know. I will however say the immense tonal shift of the last 2 episodes that A, is something that I usually fucking hate in romance when the last 2 episodes are just completely different from the rest of the series, is B, what I liked about this fucking series. I'm not gonna lie, which I think might be a little bit of a problem. If the anime actually added more onto that, like, ending, or played more on the fact that the wizard thing was in love with Anzu, I would have liked this series a little more. I did like that they fucking ended up dropping the 3D bullshit halfway through. I also think that the princely character is an absolutely unneeded character. They just wanted a Tamaki Seo type. If the Tamaki Seo type looked like Honey Senpai and had the fucking personality of a walnut, that is what they were going for with this princely type character. There only really needed there to be a plot point for the wizard falling in love with Anzu. Overall, most of my praise is for the last 2 episodes. I wish more of the series was like it, and it's a pretty average romance anime, if I'm being 100% honest. And I did find myself laughing at it just a smidgen, mostly in the last episodes, but it was just a bit, but not as much as the series probably would intend you to. To start off, it genuinely frustrated me so fucking much. So I would recommend watching it before you actually read the manga, just so that you, like me, if you are nitpicky, don't pick out these little things and get frustrated that they're not in the anime. Comedy-wise, it had more of the visual slapstick of a webtoon, specifically that one webtoon of the girl who wears makeup and gets bitches, otherwise known as True Beauty. And if you don't get what that means, it means just there's a shit ton of visual gags, and they make the main character a man and play on the fact that they're a tomboy a lot, you know? I would highly recommend for webtoon readers who have never tried anime, I guess, to like enjoy this series, or webtoon anime fans who want an anime version of something they read to watch this. Conclusively, I've been legitimately writing essays for the last like 3 weeks, once a week. Shut the fuck up, okay? I progressively liked the series more and more per episode, but in all actuality, I hated the first like 7 episodes, didn't really care about the mid 3, and adored the last 2. So yeah, that is it for Romantic Killers. And lastly is the note from my partner on their thoughts on the series, because they did watch the last parts with me. Was good. I only saw the last half of it, but it was funny and goofy. Humor was basic-ish, but it made Sleepy Brain laugh, so it was good. They also wrote this while extremely tired. I've been awake for 18 hours as of writing this. They had a like 2 to 3 hour nap and refused to acknowledge that they had a sleep. So they hadn't been up for 18 hours. Okay, now on to the complete tonal shift from romance to horror, that being Junji Ito's Maniac. Japanese Tales of the Macabre, because that's the actual full title, not Junji Ito's Maniac. So I saw many a TikTok of people going,
Run, don't walk. Netflix has made a Junji Ito series,
and people being extremely excited. Now, with me being a little gatekeeper, I personally think these people are an amalgamation of either people who have never read nor watched Junji Ito before, people who just love Tomiya, and this can be love Tomiya as in they've only ever read Tomiya, or they've never read Tomiya and just like the character and what she represents, which is a bit towards the end of Tomiya. Also people who don't really want to get into Ito because they're too scared, honestly, and need the anime as sort of a gateway in, which I'm not gonna lie, valid. Then there's also people like myself who are incredibly surprised that this came out before Uzumaki, which we've been waiting for a while. Or alternatively, people who do not know the commonly bashed precursor that I'm about to talk about, because I was honestly blindsided by the fact that Netflix had released a series before Uzumaki was released. At first I thought it was Uzumaki, and then only to be severely disappointed that it wasn't Uzumaki, but was surprised. I was excited to like see what it was about. However, when I saw the ad, it looked eerily like the Junji Ito collection, and I knew that I had to review that before reviewing this, because I want to make sure on what my opinions of that series is so that I'm not, parroting someone else's opinion, so that I can have my own views of this series. Is that to say that I wasn't a little bit influenced when going into this series? I absolutely was. So my hopes were not very high for the Junji Ito collection. That being said, the Junji Ito collection. Now I have a long string of notes. I'm mostly going to be reading off of the notes. So if I'm not looking at you guys, I'm sorry. I'm going to try and put visuals in. Try being the key word. I'm going to be doing this story by story review, as Junji Ito is mostly characterized by short stories, and so I can do a decent review based on the stories I've seen and comment on the ones that I haven't actually read in their manga form, as well as doing my overall opinion at the end of this. I will also be doing this for Junji Ito's Maniac. Now, I will note, I did watch this between English and Japanese, so every episode I kind of switched it up, and some episodes I forgot to switch it up, so the next episode after that was in English, whereas most of them would be in Japanese. I basically did alternating sub, dub, so I could get a good spectrum on the English dubs versus the Japanese subs. However, somehow I managed to only get Soichi's episodes in Japanese. So, little fun fact about that. Speaking of Soichi, we're starting with Soichi's Convenient Curse / Helldoll Funeral Episode 1. Actually being able to hear Soichi biting down on the his nails, the things you, is fucking gross. It is probably the most disturbing part, and the voice acting is actually pretty decent. Sound-wise, the series is decent. They made their spider look like a photo. I'll give them that. Now, I did say some of the voice acting was good. Some of the screams are goofy as shit. In Helldoll Funeral, the eye thing that they did at the end, I did think elevated the horror, but the gore was and did end up being lost in translation, especially with the darkness and the colour palette making it more muted. I feel like if it was highlighted more and had more colour palette, more of a colour palette, I'm doing an art history thing at the moment, and it has fucking fried my brain. Because of the colour palette, I think a lot of the gore was lost in translation. They had the visual there, they did not have the scare factor, nor the, perspective gore that you would think to see in an anime, honestly. Episode 2, The Fashion Model and the Long Dream. This was an English dub. I'm not gonna lie, I'm actually happy for the Long Dream to be dulled down. I genuinely hate it because of that one particular panel, because it genuinely terrifies me, especially as someone who has problems with their sleep. So it's genuinely a terrifying story to me, so having it be slightly dulled down by the anime seems like a good thing to me. But that was before I watched the episode. I think the pan up for the fashion model is kind of mid. They should have just gone for a one sort of they should have just had one solid frame, a close-up, maybe God, I take one art class and all the media is shoved out of my brain. Mid-shot, some shit like that. It would have been more effective with a one frame cutaway. I can't believe I'm saying this. They made the fashion model more human. They made the fashion model more human. Not necessarily in looks, but they gave her a really nice voice and actually made her sound like a person.
Excuse me. You've been filming only her scenes for a while now. When will you be putting me in front of the camera?
Any shock value from The Long Dream felt negated by the fact that any shading or colouring that they used felt like it was just a direct panel from the novel that they had coloured over with a Copic marker, and it lessened the impact just significantly. It felt like one tone, one colour. We've got the shading, which is the lines that Junji Ito typically does with a fine liner. We've got that. It kind of just felt like they screenshotted the book, the one singular panel, and then decided we're going to just get the paint tool and fill it in. That's kind of what I'm talking about. Next episode, Boy at the Crossroads, From Lovesickness and Slug Girl. So this is one of the ones that I have never seen but heard a lot about, being Slug Girl, but we're gonna go back to Lovesickness for a second. I honestly think with some eerier music, more airy to mimic the Crossroads Pretty Boy being extremely cold, it would have made more, or made the whole story just a bit more tense, at least for just the boy at the crossroads. The sun stings that they have that happen kind of out of nowhere, there's just no build to them. It's really off-putting, and not in a off-putting in a way, you know? This is the first part of the Love Sickness anthology, which technically can be a standalone. I feel like this could have been, however, a few episodes, with each episode being a different story of love sickness. I really think that could have been something that could have been really good for this series, especially because love sickness kind of doesn't just stop at the first story. As I said, it's kind of an anthology series, so they all sort of weave into one another. So just having the first part felt like it was running into nowhere, which I wasn't a fan of. I really wish they had added more episodes of it just to finish off the series, because it just feels completely unfinished. I feel like this could have been a few episodes or an episode in of itself without Slug Girl attached. Again, the sound design for Slug Girl is pretty good. In terms of the squishing of the slugs, I feel like Yuko should actually just be screaming more, but overall, it's pretty good. From the small panels that I have seen of Slug Girl, I feel like they left some keyframes out from the manga, sorry. That, or they changed the frames, which takes away from the story, in my personal opinion. Next episode, I've got more notes. Shiva / Marionette Mansion. This is an English dub. I have seen both of these. Shiva, honestly, they probably could have used different colours for the holes to make it appear red and gross and distorted. Make them even appear bigger from afar. Again, when bringing life to these characters, they kind of sucked out the horror. The sound design was okay, and what they tried to do with the Doctor and his framing could have been done better with more dramatic shading. Honestly, Marionette Mansion was done really well. I think it's because it's a mystery horror and more quirky than something visual like Shiva, Slug Girl, and the Long Dream / Fashion Model. The sound design is consistent throughout the story as well, which also helped a lot. Next is the ongoing tale of Oshikiri / Cloth Teacher. I've never seen the Cloth Teacher, however the Oshikiri collection has a deep spot in my heart, seeing as it was from Frankenstein, the first of the Junji Ito collections that I picked up. It is also the first of the Junji Ito short stories that I went, ooh, and actually got some element of scare from, which honestly made a huge impact on me. So I'm very high standard for this story series. Again, this is a shock value one. I would have liked more of the stories to be included, much like Love Sickness, and the visuals weren't all that amazing. Mayhaps for the death of Oshikiri they were fine, but that's about it. Another Soichi tale, this being the Cloth Teacher. Again, I think this was done well, as it's more of a quirky tale and didn't heavily rely on the visuals for scares. More so, it was a weird story with occult elements, and our Soichi is literally the butt of the joke. The Window Next Door and Gentle Goodbye. This was in English. The voice of the woman next door is wonderful. It's on the same par as the fashion model. However, where they made the fashion model more human, the voice for the woman next door was more freaky. I will absolutely admit that, and it fitted so well that I was sort of getting nervous about the woman next door. However, the visuals didn't translate this exact same, ooh, kind of feeling, you know?
お前のギャウってのが特にな。お前のズドンってのもな。あのズビビビってのもガツンってきたよな。ガツンってよりガツン。なんだあの。
And this is because the colour muddles what should be something that is terrifying. Gentle Goodbye is more of a sad story than horrific, so I think it's done as well as it could be. Next is Used Record and Town with No Roads. I kind of wish they mimicked Junji Ito's run style in the Used Record, those panels, and it's and clearly the character is running towards the reader. I kind of wish they'd mimicked that a little bit more instead of just having the character running like this and the scenery behind them just panning around, you know? I kind of wished it had followed that sort of run that's really panicked, give it a little more character, you know? Again, the sound design is on point. Adding multiple voices onto the track after every death is amazing and something I wouldn't have thought of. I honestly love that. The second story, the gore was censored. Junji Ito, the king of gore in the Junji Ito collection, was censored. Why? I don't understand that. The king of body horror in the Junji Ito collection, the body horror was censored. And this is in A Town with No Roads. The gore at multiple points was censored. I get needing to cover the nudity of the aunt, but the gore. Next is Honored Ancestors and The Circus Comes to Town. For some reason, there's a significant drop in quality. Here are some lovely pictures of what the fuck I witnessed with Honored Ancestors. I don't know why, but like, there was already like some weird animation, like, things going on for the series, but as soon as we hit Honored Ancestors, the fucking quality just dead on the floor, almost as smashed as the people from Smashed. That is how poor the quality of the animation got, because every single fucking frame, the characters looked like different people. I don't understand why. Characters will look one way in one frame and completely different in the next. A lot of detail is just lost, and this is something awful for a series that's trying to bring Junji Ito's works to life. Lots of series and works that are extremely detailed. This drop in quality probably shouldn't have happened for his series. This gets worse in Circus Comes to Town. The ringmaster's face is constantly changing and I don't like it. I don't know why, but just particularly episode 8 just has the worst animation quality compared to other episodes. Other episodes does have just awful bits of animation, but it's not as bad as episode 8. I don't know why that was. Next is our first Tomie, which is The Painter and Blood Bubble Bushes. Okay, they took a little more care in this episode compared to the last episode. I wonder why. And the voice actress that they got for Tomie's laugh, perfect for Tomie. Honestly, I couldn't think of another voice actress more perfect for Tomie. Unfortunately, she was not renewed for Maniac, but still, this Tomie, perfect voice, great laugh, I love it. I actually think it's kind of perfect for Tomie. The sound design makes me feel so unbelievably uneasy. Now, I don't remember if this was for Blood Bubble Bushes or if it was for Painter. Either way, it was for one of them. Now, the next two, which is Grease Bridge, which I watched in Japanese, and Supernatural Transfer Student and Scarecrow, which I watched in English. Don't have any notes because I was kind of getting bored of taking notes and being super analytical, so yeah. Next is Smashed / Rumors. Again, the sound design is amazing given the material. I legit jumped when each character got smashed. I also still hate Soichi's teeth clacking with the nails. I will say, I love Soichi so fucking much. The one thing that I loved and I want to see fan art of is Soichi going fangs. Because that was honestly really funny when he got caught out for all his lies and just did the fangs thing. I love that so much and it's genuinely really funny. I love Soichi as a character. For some reason, on Crunchyroll, Tomie, which is the 13th episode, was split into 2 parts and they're backwards. The first part of Tomie is the last episode on Crunchyroll, and the second part is the second last episode. I don't know why, but I had to keep flipping between. I watched part 1 in Japanese. Despite putting her story into 2 parts, they still cut out some very small but key details to Tomie's story, which I'm not all that happy about. I am a Tomie snob. I am going to be honest, they completely flubbed Tomiya by taking out such small details. By taking out the small details, they cheapened pretty much the whole story of Tomiya. An example of this is like what ended up happening to Yamamoto, and then the like just harsh cut to Reiko. They still do the harsh cut, they just take out the section where Yamamoto is a caring person, you know, to Tomiya, and is completely freaked out by this whole thing. They take that out despite it being a really important part to the episode. So, well, really important. It would have added to the series a little more, in my own personal opinion. They could have spent a full 23 minutes building on just the first story alone, which is something that I think they could have done with a lot of the stories, where it could have just been one episode. The entire story is one episode, just like Oshikiri, just like Love Sickness. I feel like just the first Tomiya story could have been one episode, and then the second Tomiya thing, another episode. Instead, they do two 10-minute parts, which are also taken up by credits as well, so it's not even like the full amount, but anyway. Another thing with part 1, again, with the fucking censoring. Why did they need to censor all of the gore in Junji Ito in his own collection? I don't understand. All the bits where they're cutting up Tomiya is just slashed with a black mark, and it's like, we know they're fucking cutting up Tomiya. Why are you not showing us this? Like, unless you're trying to market this series from a person who's known as the fucking body horror king to children, I don't understand why the fuck it was covered. I genuinely don't understand. Next is Tomiya Part 2, which I watched in English just to get a comparison on the voice actors. First of all, honestly, they should have just had a Tomiya anime series at this point. They clearly put a lot of effort into as many Tomiya stories as they put in, especially the first two. I don't think that the painter should have been in before these two stories. Again, they got the main points but lost a lot of the nuance, which cheapened the entire experience, especially when you know that there's a third chapter to this first Tomiya arc that continues off of the first two chapters. They, for some reason, decided to not censor this one, and I did read along with the book with this episode. A lot was taken out just to accommodate. It is 10 minutes, but I don't understand why they didn't just have one 23-minute episode just on Tomiya. That's pretty much my main gripe. Now is my overall opinion of the series. So I have a pros and cons list, but I'm going to give you the blurb first. So I was going to do pros and cons, but I'll at least talk about how they fucked up Tomiya first, because this does apply to my overall opinion. I do not understand why they couldn't have just done one 25-minute episode dedicated to the first Tomiya story, or at least done a majority episode like they did with episodes 1 and 3. Instead, they did the first two chapters at 10 minutes each, which I absolutely do not think is enough time for Tomiya. Honestly, they could have taken out one of the episodes, such as The Painter and Blood Bubble Bushes, I hate that name, and replaced it with the back-to-back Tomiya special. The first episode being Tomiya as a whole, I don't understand why more time couldn't have been given to the original Tomiya story when more time had been given to other stories. And it's this misuse of time and cherry-picking of certain stories, because again, I don't understand why they had to condense the first story of Tomiya into 10 minutes and have the first two chapters when they could have easily made 23 minutes out of the content they had for chapter 1 frustrates me. And it's not only in Tomiya that they do this. The Junji Ito collection does something that honestly bites itself in the ass if a viewer has never read a Junji Ito novel. That being to include as many stories as physically possible. They ignore adding multi-part stories, instead only giving or adding 1 or 2 parts to said anthology stories. Now, I will exclude Soichi and the fashion model from this list, as these are reoccurring characters in multiple stories. They aren't necessarily an anthology, they just pop up every once in a while. And I've already given my gripes about Tomiya, but examples of this cherry picking are The Boy at the Crossroads, the first part of Love Sickness, and the ongoing tale of Oshikiri collection. being one of the 2 later stories of Oshikiri. Now, I thought that when Love Sickness came up, they'll be doing maybe 4 episodes of Love Sickness with an extra story per episode. No, they just ignore the rest of the story. Something which leaves the audience as a whole hanging on what the conclusion of that story is. Benefit of the doubt to the creators of the Junji Ito collection. It is a strategy to get people to buy the books and read it themselves. However, this theory for me got thrown out the window when they decided to include the latter portion of Oshikiri's tales. Now, even if it's niche, that chapter calls back to an earlier chapter of Oshikiri's, such as Next Spectre. The way that Oshikiri dies, or the evil Oshikiri dies, is the sort of reference to Next Spectre, how kid that Oshikiri accidentally kills starts growing longer and longer. It is partially a callback to that story, and again, I know it's really niche, but it is a reference to that. So yeah, that's personally someone who had high expectations of the Oshikiri stuff. Again, benefit of the doubt to the creators. A newcomer audience member can interpret other Oshikiris as murderers. It is horror after all. But as someone who actively enjoys Ito's works and loves the Oshikiri tales, especially when the story is called The Ongoing Tale of Oshikiris, it feels really sloppy and lazy to have those characters by themselves in just one little episode and not have the other stories there. And it becomes exceedingly obvious that they shoved as many chapters in as physically possible, purposely ignoring multi-part stories. Now, if they just done one-shot short stories and added in Tomiya at the end, I honestly wouldn't be mad. But because they've done it this way and it feels to me that they've shot themselves in the foot, it becomes evident that they didn't really care at what chapters, other than the fact that those were probably the most popular chapters of Junji Ito. And thus, they went into the anime. They could have done 2 episodes of Love Sickness, they could have done the same with Oshikiri and still had that short story feeling. But they didn't, and honestly, from a fanatic's perspective, it really hinders the series for people who like the stories themselves, probably the main audience who will want to watch the Junji Ito fucking collection. Now, I understand this is me being extremely nitpicky, but again, I am a fanatic of these books. And again, the Oshikiri chapters are some of my favourites as they are near and dear to my heart. I hated the way that they were interpreted into the anime. That is my big main blurb. Now the pros and cons of this series. We're going to start with the cons, because that's probably what you're looking for when I'm analysing the Junji Ito collection. One is the censoring. Why the fuck are you censoring a horror series? Especially for someone who is known as the king of body horror. I do not understand that choice, and I don't know if this was done on behalf of Crunchyroll, which if it was, that's a little bit weird, a little bit suspicious, seeing as Crunchyroll has very suggestive scenes on other animes that were not censored, so that makes me believe that it was done on behalf of the actual animation studio, which just does not make sense to me. Why animate a scene and then censor it? Like, I get maybe for the Japanese public, but unless you're like showing this at prime time, I don't understand why it needed to be censored. I figured the Junji Ito collection would be aired late at night, and thus the gore makes sense to be put on a program like that. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense because it's Junji fucking Ito and it's his collection. He is known for horror and body horror and gore. Why censor it? Number 2 is that in trying to be stylistic, the visual horror of Ito's work is lost on animation. And some of the scenes just become funny looking. I took so many photos because Crunchyroll will not let you take fucking screenshots anymore, which makes me really, really mad, and it's why I had to physically film some of the Crunchyroll stuff, especially with what we're gonna see next, of characters having just an incredible, severe decrease in design in terms of like difference in distance, whether they're like having a close-up or if they're having like a mid-shot. That's the word I was thinking of before. If they're having a close-up or having like a mid-shot or a far shot, something like that. It's not called far shot, but that's the word I'm thinking of right now, and that's what I'm gonna work. Difference in distance, severely changed the appearance of the characters, which makes sense in most other anime, not someone who has very detailed looking anime, especially when the characters look different in every single scene. I'm looking at you, episode 8. Genuinely, I think that the show writers cared more about getting visuals directly from the manga, especially the more iconic ones, and didn't care about how to move the characters from A to B, because sometimes they would just be like fluid animation, sometimes it felt like a slideshow, you know? And I don't know why the animation just fucking dipped in episode 8. Like, there were episodes, sure, where the faces kept changing a lot, and the art style was pretty inconsistent in, again, trying to be stylistic. It also felt like a little bit of a slap in the face, especially since Junji kind of has same face syndrome, where a lot of the characters look exactly the same, you know? So having all these characters just look like different people in different frames was a little bit daunting. Pros for this series: the opening is pretty good, especially for a horror series. I would put it on the same par as Another for that series. 2, I alternated between English and Japanese for the dubbing, as I mentioned. The dubbing and sound design overall was pretty good. However, I do have some notes. The inconsistency in sound design between shorts does bite the series in the ass a little bit. It's only very, very subtle, and more so in the beginning episodes than latter episodes, but it's still evident. Sometimes there are stings that come out of nowhere and create jump scares that just do not need to be there, which again cheapens the entire effect of the story for me, as they are trying to recreate the page turn effect with these stings. But overall, genuinely, I think the sound design elevated the series to more of a eerie level, doing something that the animation just couldn't do. If they had made like an audiobook to go alongside the series with the same sound designers using the same sounds, I kind of would have liked it. But no, that's how much I like the sound design more than the actual animation itself. And then my third pro point is that the Soichi episodes and the episodes with more wacky concepts that don't revolve around body horror and are more like mystery or just a little bit creepy are honestly the best ones for this series. And there's a lot of Soichi episodes, so that is something that the series does incredibly well. I genuinely liked those particular ones being animated because they felt like just a creepy kid getting into some trouble, which is what they are. In most cases, if they're a Soichi episode, it's just a creepy kid getting in trouble and doing some curses. The sound design on the Soichi episodes is also done spectacularly. Again, I can't enough say what the like grinding on the nails that Soichi was doing was just felt awful, and it was fantastic. That's something that I loved. Genuinely, this series gets a 5 out of 10 for me. I like Soichi's episodes and the soundtrack was done really well in comparison to the visuals. However, it took me a lot of the visuals particularly and the inconsistencies in story, taking out a lot of the nuance, really took me out of the viewing experience and made me feel like more I was trying to analyze the series. The only stories that I could invest myself in were Soichi's and the fashion models, as well as tales that I'd never actually read in person before. But even then, I couldn't help but wonder what details was I missing from the actual story itself, knowing that the stories that I did actually know weren't all that great because there was elements missing. It's an okay series. I can't in my heart give a strong recommendation, especially if you enjoy Junji Ito. I would just straight up just recommend the books instead. If you're nervous, get Junji Ito's Cat Diary. Don't go for this anime series. It's honestly not worth it. It's incredibly mediocre from my opinion. If you want like a sound design experience, then go for this series maybe, but not for a visual experience or a genuine experience of Junji Ito. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, I cannot genuinely give a suggestion for this. Overall, average, but because so much of what makes a Junji Ito story that interesting and that fearful and that terrifying is taken away in the translation of manga panels to animation, I cannot recommend it. Absolutely not. Especially if you're just getting into Ito. If you are into Ito already and actively read the books and stuff like that, then maybe have a go, laugh at it. But I just can't, especially with the censoring, because he is the king of body horror. Why the fuck would you censor the body horror? That is just not a Junji Ito experience. You're setting yourself up for failure there, Crunchyroll or people who animated this. Why did you censor the probably biggest thing that Junji Ito is known for? So, that being said, let's move on to Junji Ito Maniac, Japanese Tales of the Macabre. So these are the notes. I only have it for a couple of episodes because I was actually genuinely enjoying this series a little bit, just a smidge. My notes. Okay, starting off with the Hikizuri siblings, probably isn't the best course for me, as I've mentioned in the past, the Hikizuri siblings is probably one of my least favourite stories. So, yay! Least favourite story is the starter. That's not foreshadowing whatsoever. This is probably done out of the Wednesday popularity, but that's only if they did it last minute as a episode rechange, which, because of the ending, it's not likely, so fun coincidence, I guess. I am not enjoying the creepy fucking border that they did on the first episode. They didn't proceed to do it for any other episodes except for the first, but I just have a thing where I do not like borders on animation, and it just bothered me when I kept seeing it, so it worries me that the opening is in the same style as the Junji Ito collection, but I do enjoy the opening. After each episode there is a small part story thing I do genuinely like. Unlike the Junji Ito collection, it actually does something that I'm sure was critiqued a lot, which is it does one story per episode in most cases. For the shorter stuff, it does 2 stories per episode, but it's an alternating 1 episode, 2 episode, 1 episode, 2 episodes, that sort of stuff. I also just watched it in Japanese for this collection. I'm not going to go back and rewatch it in English, but I watched it in Japanese. That's all you really need to know in terms of my dub situation. The animation was actually decent, and while it is the second story of the Hikizuri siblings, I don't hate that the second one was used, as it effectively shows the family's dynamic of the Hikizuri siblings, whereas the first one is more so about the sister. Granted, they could have adapted more on the fact that they just killed the sister's boyfriend, but still. Episode 2. The smoke effects in episode 2, trash. No. Why? This does not give me high hopes. But once again, it is good. Decent at least. They're not particularly going for the body horror route, at least as of episode 2 anyway, with the exception of maybe the ice cream truck, which they could have been more stylistic. But I enjoyed it. I love the use of the panels for the reconstruction of the incidents. Episode 3. I understand the use of CGI in this series, especially for this series. However, it was not at all blended well enough into the animation. All you can think of is the evident CG and Shirashi's body flapping about under the balloon. When I tell you I pissed myself laughing, nearly pissed myself laughing, I don't understand why it needed to look like that, but it was really weirdly funny. The balloon jump scare in the alley genuinely got me, and I will admit that more can be done detail-wise to make the body horror look more visually displeasing, but overall, hanging balloons was actually pretty decent, given that you try to ignore the CG and the poor blending of it. I don't know what episode this is, but it's one of the Soichi episodes. They clearly got the same VA for Soichi, which makes me really happy. Honestly, the Junji Ito's collection sounds for Soichi's nail biting is honestly better and more displeasing. You can clearly see a loop, or clearly hear a loop, for Soichi's biting in Maniac, which personally, as a audio nerd, I wasn't a huge fan of. They chose the last of the Oshikiri tales for different episodes. I honestly think they could have done or chosen a better one. And the Sandman was fucking awesome. Genuinely the scariest story, animated at least. I really liked it. I also got these 2 very strange photos, I won't even say screenshots because Crunchyroll doesn't allow you to screenshot shit. I could hear, Hair in the Attic. Okay, I didn't like it, mainly because you could hear the loop for the teeth grinding, and I don't like the teeth grinding sound. I can hear it in my skull. Episode 6, some of the dark parts are way too dark visually. Also, I can tell Yuki Kaji's voice from a fucking mile away. I know that man's voice. It's been in too many of the anime that I fucking like. This man playing a deranged character, or deranged characters, is clearly his forte, and his blood-curdling scream is quite fucking good. A very good vocal choice for the library episode. I honestly really loved Yuki Kaji's performance. Episode 7. I'm gonna need to read the actual story of Toontown because honestly this was done really well. Again, a flaw would have to be the CGI, but honestly I think it was a kind of good in this episode. It was at least blended a little bit better than it was in the Hanging Balloons. Yes, again, didn't blend the most perfectly, but it was better than before. It did also help that I hadn't seen Toontown before, but I actually really liked it, and I did get jump scared at the end and really actually enjoyed it quite a bit. Start of it was a bit slow, I will admit, but it was decent, and I think what elevated it was that I'd never seen the actual story before. Episode 8, Layers of Terror. Now this is another story that I really like, and I read it. It's not in any of these books, but I read it online, and it's really like good personally. Not so much how they did it in the anime, and I did like it. The audio stuff was pretty good. Wasn't as good as it could have been, but could have been slightly better. Then is The Thing That Drifted Ashore. I don't know what scared me so much about it, or what unnerved me even. It didn't really scare me, it more so unnerved me. Again, the CGI did take me away from the moment a little bit, but I was still slightly unnerved, whether it was like my fear of the ocean, the parallels to Gyo, or the overall visuals. Again, CGI took away from it, or the fact that I'd never seen it before, but something unnerved me about it, and I'm not sure what. Episode 9, okay, this one's a long one, because it's the Tomiya episode. I don't like how they did the Tomiya episode. 1, I think the collection animated Tomiya significantly better. She looks more like she does in the manga than in the Maniac version. 2, they stripped Sukiko of her personality and kind of made her just a bland scumbag character. I like that they used photo, which isn't a story that I often see animated or talked about, except for maybe the photos actually of Tomiya used as a graphic references, but that's about it. I don't see the actual story talked about beyond that point, so I'm glad to see it animated. However, in translating it, they decided to ignore the fact that Sukiko is the narrator of the story and not just the main character, and thus we don't get her inner monologues, nor do we actually get the snappy interactions with Tomiya and Sukiko. Or other characters, really, even her friends or people she sells photos to, we get snappy reactions with, and we don't get that in the anime. Her sass is lost, but also her agency in the latter half of the story, because this is a one-shot version of the 3-chapter arc. Her agency is just gone, because, like, she's being hunted. And, like, we don't get that agency because we don't get more of the photo story. It's just, poof, gone. Where did it go? You know? Like, she's actively being seeked out to be murdered, and there's little to no agency except when she's actually being attempted to be murdered by Yamazaki. It's really upsetting to see, honestly. Otherwise, in terms of, like, plot points, they got it pretty one-for-one with the manga. Yes, I was reading along with my actual copy of Tomiya. They did simplify it a lot. In an ideal world, personally, Tomiya would either be a movie franchise or a movie franchise of 3 parts, maybe a tie-in short film series as well, with, like, the big film series being like the first arc with then the photo arc, and then like the final arc being like Passing Dim into Old and Ugly, and like the short film series would be between photo arc and the last arc, pretty much. And ideally everything in that series would go ideally by the book exactly and be characterized perfectly. But for a 23-minute episode where it actually did a pretty good job at portraying the key elements of the story, I give it props for that. It just didn't bring the personality that we needed for the story.
Also, I want to note, for a series that like so heavily referenced Tomiya in the fucking like what's it called, promotional shit for it, there's only one episode on Tomiya. I expected more, I'm not going to lie. Like, going into the Junji Ito collection, like, you can see all the stories that are on, like, the list. And I didn't look at the stories on the list for Netflix where I did Crunchyroll, so I didn't know how many Tomiya stories there was, and I was so surprised that there was only one, and actually a little annoyed that there was only one, because one of the posters itself references one of the, like, more gruesome Tomiya stories, the third story of, like, the second arc of the Photo Girl arc, of Sakiko's arc, should I say. It directly references that story in the fucking, promotional, like, cover. And you only had the first story. Are you kidding me? Again, a lot of the selling points for Junji Ito, and I didn't mention this with the Junji Ito collection, is Soichi and Tomiya. And Soichi, I understand, at least for the collection, because there is so much fucking Soichi in that collection. And I guess Tomiya as well, because they have three episodes on Tomiya. However, I don't understand referencing the third story of Sakiko's arc and not having that story animated. I don't understand. I get having the first story animated, and we all know my opinion on that, but the third story I don't understand. And I know, I am well aware there is more than one, like, promotional art, but if you're going to promote Junji Ito, I guess I understand why you promoted Tomiya, because it's his most well-renowned, most famous works. It just frustrates me that there's only one episode, and that's the main selling point of it. I get, like, the use of the hanging balloons, because it's a pretty big episode. I get the use of maybe Soichi, because there's one or two Soichi stories. And Soichi, again, is a reoccurring character. We see him a lot in a lot of fucking stories, especially in these series. But only one Tomiya episode, and that's the cover? That I don't understand.
Next is at episode 10, The Unendurable Maze. Again, stripping the story of the substance it needed, we don't get a whole lot of context for the events of the story, and the personality of the characters are completely lost. Also, they somehow made the bully more uncomfortable to endure. I congratulate you on doing that, but it's significantly more uncomfortable in anime form than it is in thing. Not in the same way, though. That's the thing. It's not in the same way, and I think it's mostly with the voice acting of the children and the crying. It makes it so upsetting to hear. Episode 10 is probably the most uncomfortable episode to sit through, just because of the bully. And then is episode 11. I was immediately oh my god. Episode 11. So there's the headless statues episode. I was so quickly taken out of the moment by the discordant jazz saxophone that fucking started playing when the main character was confronted with the headless mannequins. Why the fuck was there a discordant jazz solo in the middle of this incredibly intense scene? I don't understand. and it's a little bit funny to me. Took me right out of the moment and made me laugh a little bit because I wasn't expecting it. So what do I think of the series overall? Now, I'm going to parrot a lot that's being said in the notes like I did with the Junji collection section, but pretty much I actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a fair bit. I do think it has a one-up on the Junji collection personally. It could have done artistically something more stylistic. As I said, Tomiya wasn't Tomiya in this series, which made me kind of upset. I loved the format that they went through because it is one of the biggest critiques that I had of the Junji collection, where they had some episodes where it was just one story and they kept to that story, and then other episodes where it was two shorter stories. Personally, I feel like they could have expanded more on certain stories, but I feel like those kinds of stories, for example the Hikizuri siblings or the Tomiya series, either needs to be its own series or needs like a film series or something like that. Obviously the CGI, depending on what episode, is garbage, and they didn't necessarily go the body horror route as compared to the Junji Ito collection. This really does feel like they took the notes from the Junji Ito collection and applied it to the into Maniac, and honestly I actually really appreciate that, despite only having watched the collection the day prior, and I don't know if it's because of all my previous biases that I didn't like the Junji Ito collection more, but that being said, I actually really enjoyed it. There are some moments where I really wish they didn't have CGI or special effects, just because it cheapened the look of the entire thing, or they could have blended some of the CGI into the animation more. I know for a fact, I haven't looked at other reviews yet, but I know for a fact it's going to be bombed to shit because they use CGI. I actually think they did it more effectively. I will say, compared to the collection, their soundtracks aren't as good. It could have been improved more. There wasn't really a whole range of diversity in sounds. A lot of the sounds were replayed. You could hear loops going on. Honestly, probably a downgrade as the comparison to the Junji Ito collection. The one thing I did also like about the Junji Ito collection was it was more stylistic, where it looked closer to Junji Ito's style of drawing. However, the collection trying to be stylistic, it dropped frames, made the animation overall look much more terrible quality. That didn't happen in the Junji Ito collection. They did still look like Junji Ito characters, but did look like anime adaptations of Junji Ito characters. Some characters, like Tomiya, I do wish they had kept more stylistic, because again, that didn't look like Tomiya to me. That looks like a random pretty girl from an anime, which made me upset, because in the opening, you see that stylistic version of Tomiya. And that's another thing. For Tomiya and Soichi to be featured so much in the opening and ending, I really wish there had been more. Like, it made sense that Soichi and Tomiya were featured in the collection because there was two Tomiya episodes, and there was multiple Soichi episodes. Whereas there was only like 2 or 3 Soichi like sections and 1 main Soichi episode in the Junji Ito collection, and only 1 Tomiya episode in the collection, in Maniac, sorry. Something else that I did really like is that they didn't touch on stories that the collection had already done. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of would have liked if they had done that a little bit, but I'm not hugely mad at the fact that they didn't do that. I actually kind of appreciate we get to see a huge, like, larger range of Junji Ito stories that get to be animated, and a few of them I really, really liked. Personally, my favourite actually had to be the Sandman, because it genuinely gave me the same fear that the Sandman did originally in, like, the manga, and I will say some of the animation was a little bit goofy, but I actually enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed that specific one, and there was I don't remember which one, I've probably said it in my notes already. There was another one that I really liked that really effectively did their adaptation well. And a lot of the ones that I hadn't... Oh, The Bully, that was what it was. The Bully actually did it semi-decently. I will say it, semi-decently. There is some things that like, the Maniac series could have done to do it better, but with the time limit they were given, plus the, like, things that they had to get in because it's Junji and they have to make sure they get these right plot points, they did lose and tend to lose some of the nuances. That's the biggest thing across the series, is the loss of nuances is a problem when translating Junji to the screen. Now, in terms of body horror, I actually really like that they steered away from body horror a lot. In terms of Maniac, there is a lot of little things that it could have done to be better, such as making episodes split into two, as in like one Tomiya chapters, 2 episodes, just to add that little bit of nuance, because they definitely stripped a lot of nuance out of certain stories that I really think could have been enhanced if they had left it in, as well as the fact that they didn't blend certain animation things well, so it looked really, really cheap. The audio quality, not audio quality, but like sound design could have been better, though I will say it does vary quite wildly between episodes. Some of them it's done like super effectively, and some of it it's not, whereas in the collection it was kind of just concisely really good, though it also did fluctuate a little bit, but not as much as it does in Maniac. As someone who loves Junji, I really actually like this series more than the collection. Was it a little bit disappointing? Yes. See, a lot of the problem with translating Junji to the screen is, first of all, body horror, and second of all, level of detail, and third of all, the nuances in character, as you don't get a lot of the narration that you would get from, say, manga panels, and characters literally narrating stuff. Like, as I said, Sakiko, we don't have her character because she's the narrator in photos in Tomiya. We do not have her narration in photos in Tomiya in Maniac. A lot of the character quirks, because a lot of these characters, these main characters, are narrators, falls flat on its face. I will say, both series, comparatively, when they do quirky chapters, it works. It's perfect. Soichi chapters, I have no problem with in these series. Honestly, if they did a whole series that's just Soichi, I would have liked it a lot, I reckon, because that would have been just such a fun concept. All of the Soichi chapters. That would have been so fun, personally. And this is coming from someone who hasn't read a whole lot of the Soichi chapters, but the ones that I have read that did appear in the collection and Maniac were really good. I really liked them. I would have liked to see the Soichi's family circus one. Would have really liked to see that. I will say they did choose some of the more absurd chapters, and again, this was probably to avoid the body horror element, which was something that was incredibly lacking in the collection. Honestly, I really like that, as I said, but some of the quirky stories they picked were kind of bland. Like, I feel like a lot of nuance was lost to make them that bland, because I don't understand why they had been animated. Personally, I kind of would have liked to see the Amigara faults be animated in this series, because it's one of the big ones. Other thing that I really liked was references to either the manga directly or references to other things in other episodes. So for example, in the ice cream van, you had a reference to, I believe it was the next episode, which was the floating balloons, the first girl who dies. You see her interview pop up in the scene where the kid is eating his friends. I thought that was really cool. In another scene, in another story, the hell book that is in the library, oh my god, I'm blanking on all the names, that the hell book that's in the library story, you see in the story of the tall wall. That's something that I find really cool. And again, in Hanging Balloons, you see a panel, an actual physical panel from the actual manga. I love it when anime does that, when they bring up a panel from the manga itself. I don't know why, it just feels exciting. It's like, oh my god, that's the actual manga. Oh my god, they have the actual art. Oh my god, that's so cool. I love that. I honestly adore little tidbits like that. It also makes you think, are all of these in the same universe, or at least some of these are in the same universe? So I find that really fun. You get to make your own little collective universe of Junji Ito. So I absolutely adore that. Personally, out of the two, which one you should probably watch, or which one I would recommend, if you want to watch more of the like acclaimed stories, so stuff that will be in the collection books, so this being Smashed, Shiver, all of that, if you want to see those animated, I would go to the collection. However, overall, I would actually suggest Maniac. It is slightly better animated. It has, honestly, a better fear factor. There's less Soichi, but even still, Soichi's episodes are pretty good. And just in general, I think I prefer it. I will say I did get some scares in there. A lot of the stuff that I hadn't seen, I was more invested in. But even then, like the stuff that I did know, I was excited to see animated. If you are an avid fan of Junji Ito, I might put this one on the back burner. I wouldn't jump to see it. I'm personally more interested in going to see Uzumaki whenever the fuck that comes out. I swear to God, if it doesn't come out this year, I'm gonna cry. Anyway, I will probably maybe avoid Junji Ito's Maniac just for a little bit. If you're very morbidly curious, then go for it. There is some genuinely good parts, but not all of it is the best, I will say that. There's also some pretty fucking good laughs that you can get from some of the poor quality CG. It's a mixed bag. It's probably more of a like plain mixed bag in comparison to the collection, which is just an absolute turbulent mixed bag of stuff. In all honesty, I think I'll give Junji Ito's Maniac Japanese Tales of the Macabre, I think I'm gonna have to give it a 6. Because I did really like it. I had some moments where I was like, oh, like I did in the manga, which was genuinely really good. However, I think because I had that predisposed thing with the collection, that's why I ranked it at a like 5 or 6 as well, whereas this one was actually just a little more plain. It did things effectively. It went by the book where it like made sure it had all the right plot points. It just took a lot of the nuance out of the scares. There was obviously a few that were like better than the others, but it's not a whole lot, so it gets a 6, 7-ish out of me. And it kind of just proves to me that it's really, really difficult to bring Junji Ito books to the screen. With that being said, let's move on to February anime. Now, the only anime that I pretty much watched was the My Hero Academia Season 6, which is continuously ongoing, as well as the Kaguya-sama movie, The Kiss That Never Ends. Now, I will link the full review that I did of the actual movie itself up in the little icon up here, but basically, Kaguya-sama, The Kiss That Never Ends, my thoughts on it. It was really good. There was some points that was disappointing. The actual ending of the film, I really think could have been done much better, because it kind of just felt like it was paced super well throughout the entire film, and then it was like a bullet at the end. So it was very conflicting, and I didn't necessarily like it. It wasn't done in the regular Kaguya-sama way, so annoyed me. Also, some of the animation was a little bit unfortunate with, at least at the very beginning of the film, some of the characters, especially in the foreground, didn't appear like they should be in the foreground. They appeared like they should be in the background, and it was a little bit unfortunate. Overall, I really enjoyed the film. I had a great laugh. I was with a bunch of like-minded people in the audience, and it was genuinely really funny. It's Kaguya-sama. I love Kaguya-sama. It was one of my favorite series, and I hopefully can't wait for a season 4. I do, however, also wish that they had touched on the Ishigami Tsubame Ino stuff which they referenced but didn't show, which makes me think there's going to be a season 4, but I don't know yet. Again, that will be linked in the iCard up there. But now this isn't anime. I should mention the thing that I did watch a lot of in February, which is the K-drama The Fabulous. Now this is on Netflix. I honestly love it. You could say it's fabulous, but personally I loved it as someone who loves the world of fashion, the realm of fashion. Seeing like a drama based on that world makes me really happy. It follows a group of 4 people, a fashion designer, a model, someone who works behind the scenes, that being a PR manager, and a photographer, and their journey through their fashion world as they try to get to the next level in their careers. Now the series does something absolutely fantastic and does a full circle kind of story where it starts off with a fashion show and ends with a fashion show, and I really appreciate it. I absolutely adore this K-drama. For some reason it's always K-dramas with Minho from SHINee that I just love. I mean, I love that man. I'm a sucker for anything that he is in, but just particularly those kinds of K-dramas where he's acting in it are my favorite. I don't know why. It's not just because of him, but it's partially because of him. I also really like the messages of the actual K-drama itself, as well as having a lot of nice little references tied up in a bow. Now, I will say at the start of this series can be a little bit frustrating as you don't really know the background of these characters and are like unwrapping it throughout the series. I do like and not like that format. Like, it's very similar to the way Kaguya-sama unwraps the backstories of these characters, where they seem a little bit arrogant at first and then you like realize that there's more there, you get to hear their backstory and all that sort of stuff. At first it's very jarring, but it's not too bad, especially for a K-drama. It's actually quite decent. I honestly love it. I honestly feel like some of the actors I've seen in other shows, but I don't know what shows because I went onto their wikis and I know none of their shows. I honestly love this series, and a lot of the fashion in it actually gave me ideas for outfits that I can make in the future. So I personally love The Fabulous. I could not recommend it more for if you like K-dramas and if you like the fashion world. That's not anime, so we're not going to talk about anime anymore. That is all the things that I watched in February of 2023. So, February manga. Now, clearly this is the weeb wrap-up of Junji Ito because I have also purchased a Junji Ito novel for this month. I felt like I needed it. Anyway, from Fragments of Horror, this is a book that I've been meaning to get into my collection for a while. I, prior to owning this book, had read 2 of the stories, that being The Whispering Woman and The Wooden Spirit, and had watched Gentle Goodbye in anime form. Now, my notes on the actual short stories in this itself go per story as per usual. I actually listed down all of the stories, which include Futon, Wooden Spirit, Tomie-o, not Tomie, Red Turtleneck, Gentle Goodbye, Dissection-chan, Blackbird, Magami Nanakuze, and The Whispering Woman. Now, as I just mentioned, I'd already read The Whispering Woman and Wooden Spirit, so those didn't come as a surprise to me. But on the note of all of the other stories, as I mentioned in the anime adaptation section, I have seen and know of the Gentle Goodbye as I watched it for the Junji Ito Collection Maniac section of the video. So I already knew the story, but I definitely can say in the form of the original story that it is a lot sadder in manga form than it is in anime form, but the anime, I will say, had adapted it quite well. Now, on the other stories of Fragments of Horror, Futon is incredibly similar to another Junji Ito tale. I believe that story was called Mold. That's pretty much the only note that I had on the topic of the same character, Tomio, in Red Turtleneck. While not the most horrific tale, it is definitely intense, and I haven't experienced this intensity in a story in a while in terms of the situation. I really applaud how this character's Tomoya, how Junji was able to like create this intensity in this high intensity situation for this character who's just holding their head. It's honestly kind of awesome. Is it the most horrific? Absolutely not, but it is certainly intense, and I do appreciate that. Next is the section-chan. It's decent and definitely creepy. That's all I really had to say. Blackbird is honestly really good. The imagery of the giant bird is insane and did actually make me jump. I honestly love it. Then is Megami Nanakuze. A little all over the place and not my most favorite. It just feels like a lot. It is one of those quirky character kind of stories that aren't always my favorite. They're very hit or miss when it comes to Junji Ito. It's either a great one and it's like fun and it's like a really good one, like maybe a lot or a few of Soichi's ones I find really fun. Or it could be something like the Hikizori siblings where I really just wasn't gelling with it, and Megami Nanakuze is one of those stories where I wasn't necessarily gelling with the weird quirky character in this scenario. Overall, however, from Fragments of Horror, my favourite story to this day is still The Whispering Woman. It's been my favourite for a long time, specifically from this story collection, and yeah, so Fragments of Horror, overall I think it's pretty good. Would I think it's better than Venus in the Blind Spot? I'm gonna say probably, because I honestly really like a lot of the stories that go on here, and there was a bunch of stories that I actually had never seen before, and I got a new kind of horror experience from Red Turtleneck that I wasn't expecting, so yeah. So now is a little bit of an update of everyone's favorite psychological mother-son horror fucking abomination, that is Blood on the Tracks. Now this is for the recent chapters 134 through 137. The last chapters thus far have been all on Seiko, otherwise known as our mother character. I didn't have her name before, now I know it properly. And now it seems clear that the mother has has mental issues and a very similar mental state to our Seiichi, meaning that these mental issues are probably hereditary, as they seem to see the world in a very similar way, or as the series mentioned earlier in like one of the pretty early chapters, there was something about family members having telekinesis or telepathy, one of the two, and being able to like read each other's minds. So it might be some weird fuckery with that as well. I don't know. I'm just enjoying the series for its just discomfort and its mind fuckery, thus psychological horror. But that is really all I have for Blood on the Tracks thus far. I did only read like 3 chapters or so. Now moving on to some manga that I read online, and this is a TikTok recommendation because I, for some reason, at the very start of February, was only getting recommendations for different manga on TikTok, so I have a lot of them. So starting off is The Guy She Was Interested Wasn't a Guy at All. This manga is pure fluff. Okay, a little backstory. This is a kind of webisode manga comic, like the ones that you'll find on Instagram or Twitter. It's posted on Twitter, but there are translations of it online in a more condensed form. Our main character, Aya, is a gyaru who likes rock music and punk, and has absolutely fallen in love with this guy who works at the music store that she frequents. Mitsuki is Aya's classmate, and she works at her uncle's music shop. I think you can see where this is going. Aya is in love with Mitsuki. Mitsuki freaks out, but ends up going along with it. Why? Because she's a raging lesbian, but she doesn't realize it yet. You know, classic romantic stuff. Now, my actual thoughts on the series is that it is so fucking fluffy that I adore it, and it's fluffy in that really, really good romance kind of way, you know? Not fluffy and it's like a, yeah, that's cute. No, it's in a, get together, that kind of way, a really intense, fluffy kind of way. I don't know if I'm portraying this right. There is currently 36 chapters and I am eating up every single one. I am obsessed. And third of all, Yuri comment sections are the best. I've read Yaoi comment sections and Yuri comment sections. Yuri ones are the best. I have thus decided. And lastly, what the fuck is it with Yuri and music tropes? Because there's more of them coming. There is actively more Yuri stories that I'm going to be talking about that have bands or music. What is it with lesbians and music? I love it, don't get me wrong, but now I can suddenly see why people thought K-On! Was a Yuri anime, because oh my god, there is so many Yuri manga that take place in either a music setting, a band setting, I don't know, but I'm eating it up. Maybe that's why. And it's always a shy bitch with a guitar and a really, really loud bitch as well. Honestly, this series gets an 8 out of 10 for me. Will I keep reading it? If I remember. The next Yuri novel that I got to read, as February was the month of love, I decided to go full force into reading romance stories between women. We have Yuri Espoir. Now, I got this in Minotaur and I saw the second volume. I should have fucking picked it up because oh my god, I love this series. The format of this book, I love it. And I was like coerced into buying this because I originally wasn't gonna buy something from Minotaur. When I went out and bought this, I kind of just went into the city to have food and we went by Minotaur, and because this is distributed by Tokyopop, you usually don't see a lot of new stories distributed by Tokyopop anymore. My friend went, buy it. It's by Tokyopop. So I did, and I don't regret it because fuck, it is cute. Yuri Espoir is so fucking cute and I love it. Our main character, Kokoro, is a rich teenager who's been put into an arranged marriage and will be married to a man at the end of the year. Only problem is, she's a lesbian. Firm on the fact that she'll die emotionally when she's married off, Kokoro turns to her friend Amami for a proposal of creating a Yuri sketchbook that Kokoro can use for imagining lesbian relationships when she eventually dies emotionally. The format of this book is honestly so fucking cute, as Kokoro will see two women or two people in general and imagine a scenario for them. And the next chapter is the actual lives of those people featured in the chapter that Kokoro is imagining their lives about, and it usually is people in women loving women scenarios. And I honestly love that format so fucking much, as you don't get to like just sit and wonder what these characters actually are, you get to see a peek into their lives. Would I like to see more of their lives? Absolutely. But will that happen? Probably not. So I also love the fact that this has a wide range, a variety of ages for the characters that are shipped together, from high schoolers to office workers to college students. There is a lot. I was a little bit uncomfortable when they started having a relationship dynamic idea with middle schoolers being the targets. That was a little weird, but most of the other characters are like late teenage, early adult to office worker age adults, so I am willing to overlook it once and hope it doesn't happen again. And genuinely, the huge dynamic range of ages and different personality types and different occupational differences is really refreshing, because it's not just a story about teenage girls falling in love with other teenage girls, it's the whole fucking spectrum. And now I'm just gonna say what every mentally ill bitch is thinking and having a story based around making up imagines to cope is exactly the representation we needed. It's honestly a little bit refreshing to know, because while I don't make imagines of real people, making imagines of fictional characters falling in love to mentally cope is such a fucking mood. Of note, all of the couples on the cover are, with the exception of the main two characters, are the couples that Kokoro ships together. And if you're wondering, this one is the best one. It is a lesbian relationship. It's the best one. Trust me. Best one. Honestly, I love it. I'm still kicking myself that I did not pick up volume 2. I wish I fucking did, because it's expensive now on Booktopia. Just angry. I will say, from memory, this one didn't, for once, have music lesbians on it, but you know what Yuri story has music lesbians? Yeah. How Do We Relationship. Finally got volume 1 of this. So this was supposed to be part of my Christmas present. So Mum bought all the books that she had been meaning to give me off of Booktopia, and the ones that ended up being back-ordered were the Idle Dreams books and the How Do We Relationship books, and volume 2 still has not rocked up. So I will only be reviewing volume 1. I have volume 3. I'm not touching volume 3 until I've got volume 2. So, volume 1 of How Do We Relationship, I have finally fucking started the series after having volume 3 for almost an entire goddamn year. I almost considered selling that book. I'm glad I didn't, because I am somewhat invested in this series. That being said, in comparison to this, I don't know how to feel about this series. While this is really cute, very relatable, a little bit cheesy, especially on the romance side. This is so painfully awkward and real. The whole, like, very millennial, how do we relationship kind of title, yeah, accurate. Oh my god. It's like Miwa is a walking disaster and Seiko is me. Honestly. So How Do We Relationship goes through the beginning of a lesbian relationship between Miwa and Seiko, two college-age students, at least 20, because they do show the characters going to drinking parties. The drinking age in Japan is 20, so they have to at least be 20 years old, I think. Interestingly enough about these two characters is that they're in a fucking band together. It's always the band lesbians. It's always the music lesbians. Why? Why do I always pick up music lesbian books? They're fucking good, but holy shit. This series is true to its name as the struggle of the drop-dead gorgeous Miwa, who's never been in a relationship whatsoever, let alone a lesbian one, starts a relationship with Seiko, who has been in multiple past relationships and has had a few negative experiences with her partners getting hurt, particularly if they are female partners. Their relationship starts at the beginning of the series, with each chapter being a new struggle in their relationship and a new drama. And this is where my issue comes in. I do like the book, but I dislike it for the exact same reasons that I dislike the certain elements in That Blue Sky feeling. This being that in every chapter there is a new drama. I will give the series its props. It does portray a extremely realistic depiction of a beginning of a relationship, especially the start of a relationship of two people in their late teens to early 20s, and I will say it's got all the awkwardness of someone who's getting into the relationship for a first time. This being from someone who has experienced this exact same thing. However, I personally would not like to experience it again. So that is a lot of where my awkwardness comes in with the series, where I read a chapter and then remember that almost the exact same thing occurring when I was starting to date my partner. Uncomfortable but very realistic depiction of a relationship, I'm not gonna lie. It is definitely a bit dramatized. It still seems moderately realistic to what actual relationships are like, and I do appreciate that. Honestly, it is a pretty good reflection of relationships and the awkwardness in them, especially taking a look at and into a queer relationship. However, As you may know, I'm not a huge slice of life fan, and this series is very slice of lifey. It's very romance slice of lifey, bordering more onto the slice of life aspect. It does not have the same fluffiness that Yuri Espoir does, nor does it have the fluffiness of the guy I like wasn't a guy at all. Maybe because there's a gimmick and there isn't a huge gimmick in How Do We relationship except for the music thing, but the music thing with lesbians has been done to absolute death, so maybe that's what I'm missing from this series personally. But I personally just feel like it has more of a slice of life element to it, and that's just what I'm not liking about the series. I do appreciate the series, and genuinely, I do think it's pretty funny. The cast of characters is wacky, wild, and wonderful. I also like how a lot of the characters are reacting to Seiko saying that Miwa and Seiko are in a relationship. I appreciate Seiko's like aversion to telling people, but most of the characters being like, cool, you're a lesbian, don't give a shit, that sort of aspect. I also do think that the questions that many of Miwa and Seiko's band members are asking, while they are extremely inappropriate, does seem accurate to how some people ask in real life, especially when they don't know. I know when I came out, my mum asked me a lot of questions that it's like, come on, this is common sense, but people ask questions, so it does seem pretty realistic. In comparison to the other Yuri manga that I have been reading, it was a little bit of a letdown, especially with the whole, like, as I said, fluff department. Probably because there was more of a structural gimmick with this series than compared to this series, but it's definitely not bad. It's just kind of average personally. I really appreciate the series with its characters who are in university and are roughly around my age and having experiences that I have had in the past. I do appreciate that aspect, but it feels a little bit too like close to home for me personally. I am going to continue the series, but having a toned down series after a really whimsical and fluffy fucking series or an edgy romance makes this feel more like a letdown, which is more so on me and my tastes with the series, or my tastes in anime and manga, than on the actual story itself. I would absolutely recommend these for people who are maybe in high school or maybe don't like a series like this where it's like got a gimmick and like more realistic-ish kind of stuff. I would recommend this. And again, I do like it, just not as much as the other manga, especially since like you've got Whisper Me a Love Song, which is like ramping up in the drama and like had this slow incline, whereas this is sort of just here. That's how I describe it. I guess it has its moments and I honestly do like it. I just don't love it. Think that if you like slice of life Yuri, this is probably what you're looking for. However, I will say, I love the character of Rika. I love a good slut. Love a good slut. She's absolutely a girl's girl while being straight, mostly. And just having her sleeping around and being like a super sexual character is just really refreshing, especially since she's a character that's like very supportive and realizes when she's being a fucking idiot. I love it. I love it. The series, however, as a whole, gets a bit of a 6.5 to 7 out of 10 for me. We move on to our last manga of today. Now this is another TikTok recommendation. I have found myself also on, aside from the manga recommendation side of YouTube, I have found myself on the Gyaru side of, did I say YouTube? I meant TikTok. I found myself on the Gyaru side of TikTok as well, and that culminated into this wonderful recommendation of Super Baby. Now, I read the first 2 volumes, which is roughly 11 chapters of Super Baby. I will say off the bat, the translation that I read made Super Baby a little bit difficult to actually read, but I did get a hang of it, and as the series progressed, the translation got better. But I will say, just at the very start, it was very all over the place to get into. So the story of Super Baby is super forward and super energetic. Kuro, it's always Kuro. It's always Kuro. I cannot say that word. Kuro Garu Tamao and her shy, bookish, and nerdy crush, soon-to-be boyfriend, Rakumaru. This is a mostly light and fluffy series with some dark moments in the second volume. So I will say, before you read this series, there is a trigger warning for mentions of abuse and depictions of abuse, specifically in the later chapters of the second. Most of the story is from Tamao's perspective, a former Manba Gyaru who came to Tokyo to become a Tokyo gal. We are instantly time skipped several years later and she's graduated to being a Kuro Gyaru, who's fallen head over heels for a guy from the supermarket, our wonderful Yamada Raku. I appreciate the series for being pretty cute and talking about gyaru, a fashion subculture which I have been getting very interested in. Would I personally actually wear gyaru? No, but I do actually adore and appreciate the subculture. I think it's a pretty cool subculture in terms of fashion and in terms of street fashion wear. Gyaru is a subculture that I've wanted to learn more about and not necessarily wear in my own personal style, but at least be very knowledgeable about. I really like looking into street fashion, so having this many like manga recommendations, all that stuff that's talking about different subcultures is really fun. And as you can see, I tried to do a little Harajuku thing with my Cinnamoroll cosplay. Have I mentioned that it's a Cinnamoroll cosplay yet? I don't think I have. This is a Cinnamoroll cosplay. I thought it was very cute. Okay, continuing on. The story itself is pretty standard, but I do love how the mangaka handles some of the subplots in the series and the relationship between Rakumaru and Tamao. It honestly feels genuine. It's honestly a little bit of a fresh air in a relationship concept that has been done to death, though because of the translation that I had, there was a little bit of a awkwardness in trying to follow the actual plotline of the series, as I mentioned earlier. This series is still ongoing and I would suggest absolutely giving this a read, especially if you're interested in the subcultures of gyaru, as they do tend to go into the different subcultures a little bit, and I got to learn the difference between Yamamba, Mamba, and Kuro Gyaru. Honestly, I would give Super Baby a 7 out of 10 just because I find it pretty sweet. It's nowhere near like Yuri Espoir in terms of romance, but it's pretty fun. I was more invested in it than I was in How to Be a Relationship, so that should be a pretty big sentiment on how I feel about the series. It's pretty average, but honestly a lot of fun. If you like gyaru characters, I would recommend it. If you like outspoken characters, or if you like loud girl with quiet boy pairings, then I would absolutely recommend this series. But overall, it got a 7 out of 10 for me.
Okay, I just finished this and it would be absolute crime if I didn't mention it. Raoku Notice Me. Okay, so this is a really cute, this is also a TikTok recommendation, but it is also a extremely cute and adorable romance manga that is only 8 chapters long, at least in the translations that are currently available. Personally, I adore it. It is about our main character Hino-chan, and she is a chubby girl and she gets bullied a lot because she is a chubby girl, and she has attracted the attention of the delinquent Rao-kun. Now, Rao is, as I just said, a delinquent, but is head over heels for Hino, and Hino just does not understand. They start dating, and their romance begins. It is pure fluff, but I love it so much. It is so adorable. Each chapter, it's pretty much reinforced that Rao-kun likes Hino because Hino is Hino. He doesn't care about the way she looks. He adores her. He loves her. So it is so fucking cute. It is also very funny for the limited chapters that we have. If you have a chance, read it. It's only 8 chapters long. You can easily read that within an hour. So yeah, I would absolutely 100% recommend Ralcom Notices Me. And I say this as I'm currently editing this video, so you know it's gonna be fucking good that I couldn't wait 2 months to tell you guys about it. So yeah, that is my last addition to this section.
And that is all of my anime and manga for February and January of 2023. I was dying to make a fucking weeb wrap up all of January, especially since I went so hard into that Junji Ito section, but I held back to February, and I'm glad I did. Granted, I think this is being released in the first week of March. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next week wrap up in 2 months for March and April, where hopefully we'll be starting Attack on Titan Season 4 Part 3. For fuck's sake. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you like this week wrap up, then you will probably like my deep dives into the Kaguya-sama series. Maybe you want to watch the Junji Ito video, but it's pretty much what I put into this video. Thank you guys so much if you've watched this video, because I know it's gonna be super long, and I hope to see you guys next week. Bye.